You spoke too soon. That was your first mistake. Before she even looked at you, you had already written her name into your bones, and she smelled it, not your longing, but your lack of silence. Do you remember the first woman who walked past you without stopping? Not the one you touched, but the one who almost turned around. Her shadow lingered longer than her presence. That was the beginning. That's when something ancient inside you started barking for recognition, thinking love was earned by devotion. Fool, the lion never roars when begging. He only roars to remind the jungle it still belongs to him. You built altars with your words. She wanted thrones made of your restraint. But you confessed. You exposed the fire, thinking heat would melt her coldness. You forgot ice doesn't melt, it cracks. And when it cracks, it cuts. That scar you carry, it's not from her betrayal. It's from your own noise in the sacred halls of power. You mistook volume for value. Now sit still, do not speak. Let the silence grow teeth. You gave her the fire before she asked for warmth. You bled before she touched the knife. You offered the hunt before she even realized she was hungry. And in doing so, you betrayed the law written beneath all beauty, that which is given too easily is already lost. You thought your love was a gift. It was not. It was a symptom. The desperate rattling of a man who no longer believes he can be chosen in silence. You wanted her to see your soul, not realizing that the soul shown too soon is nothing but meat for wolves. You became the celebration before she felt the absence. You placed your crown at her feet before she noticed your spine. She did not betray you. She obeyed something deeper than language, older than memory. A rhythm carved in the bones of women who have outlived empires never trust the man who loves too loud. For his need will eat you, his love will bind you, his gaze will become a leash, and no queen kneels for a man who begs her to notice. You think she left because she was cruel, but cruelty needs no reason. She left because you erased the question before it could form. You unveiled yourself completely, and in doing so, you became predictable, explainable, yours. You stripped yourself of mystery and draped her in the burden of your adoration. You didn't love her, you worshipped her. And worship, when unearned, becomes a form of cowardice. The coward hides behind praise, hoping that sacrifice will substitute for stature. But women do not follow the sacrificed. They follow the sovereign. You should have been the altar, not the offering. You mistook honesty for power, so you confessed your dreams, your wounds, your longing. You thought your suffering would sanctify the bond. But suffering untempered is not intimacy. It is exposure. It is flooding the garden before she plants the seed. She looked at you full of raw, eager emotion and felt the coldness of a man trying to drown her in his need. You didn't listen to the voice inside that warned you wait. The voice that knows desire cannot be declared, it must be evoked. And so she chose the man who said nothing, the one whose silence wasn't empty but sharpened, the one who did not chase because his world was already full. You called him arrogant, toxic, aloof. But she did not kneel because he controlled her. She knelt because he controlled himself. You held out your heart like a broken compass, hoping she would follow where it pointed. He simply stood still and the world bent around him. You see, the man who loves too loud believes he is generous, but his love is theft. He robs her of discovery, of chase, of hunger. He denies her the sacred right to choose slowly, to approach mystery with reverence. You thought your affection was a bridge, but it was a cage. And every word you whispered, every poem you penned, every truth you confessed tightened the bars. She left not because she couldn't love you, but because she couldn't breathe in your presence. Because every time she looked at you, She saw herself reflected in the mirror of a man who needed her to survive. And that is not desire. That is dependence. And dependence, no matter how beautiful its language, is always devoured by contempt. You were not betrayed. You were unmasked. You thought your love made you noble. But nobility does not scream. It does not ache loudly in the night for recognition. It waits. It builds. It sharpens itself in solitude. You mistook your desperation for depth. But depth is silent. It does not announce itself. It pulls. It hums. It does not beg. You loved too soon, too completely, too loudly. And now, you mourn a ghost, not the woman, but the illusion you created of yourself in her eyes. You do not miss her. You miss the reflection of a man you hoped you could become if only she chose you. But that man was never born because you never let yourself be unknown long enough to be desired. You gave her everything, and that is why she left. Because what is everything to a woman who has not yet earned it? It is an insult. A reminder that you did not see her as capable of conquering. You crowned her before the war, and the crown meant nothing. She walks now beside someone else, not because he is better, but because he is silent, because he knows that love, when real, does not announce itself like a parade. It arrives like winter slowly, inevitably, without permission. He knows that a woman's desire is not seduced by volume, but by restraint, not by declarations, but by absence. And he has mastered the art of being absent just enough to be unforgettable. You have not lost her. You never had her. You had a moment, a gaze, a possibility, and you screamed at it, thinking the louder you loved, the more real it would become. But reality is forged in stillness, in the quiet waiting between heartbeats, in the self that does not perform. You tried to prove your worth through emotion, but worth does not prove itself. It simply is. And in your attempt to be seen, you vanished. You became noise. And no matter how beautiful the noise, she will always long for the silence that commands it. Let this hunger stay. Let it burn through you. Let it teach you that no woman, no matter how radiant, can fill the space you refuse to inhabit yourself. Love is not earned through noise. It is granted through presence, through the quiet terror of a man who no longer fears being unseen. Because the man who loves too loud is not dangerous. He is predictable. And women do not betray danger. They betray safety that screams too soon. They betray softness that has not been hardened by solitude. They betray the man who gives without being asked, because what is given freely is never worth the cost it hides. And you were free, but not in the way that liberates. You were free like an open wound, aching to be tended. She could not love you because she would have had to mother you, and she already had a child. Her own silence, her own power, her own name. You were not her answer, you were her echo, and echoes do not stay. They fade, because they were never real sound, only the memory of something once loud. Now let the feast end, let the table rot, let the wine sour. The man who speaks first is the one who loses the war. And you, poor poet, poor knight of hollow sonnets, you announced your death before the sword was even raised. There is a reason the lion does not howl beneath the moon. He waits, watches, and when he moves, it is without ceremony. You were taught to speak your feelings, to confess them like sins in exchange for salvation. But the beast does not explain his nature. He merely breathes and the world remembers its place. You forgot that silence is not absence. It is dominance unspoken. She did not want your love in words. She wanted to be swallowed whole in your silence. The throne does not rise for the man who performs. It rises for the man who can sit in stillness, while the world burns around him. The one who can endure the unbearable tension of not being chosen without flinching. That is where power begins, not in victory, but in the refusal to need it. And you needed her gaze like breath. You offered yourself as the reward before she even entered the arena. The beast is not a reward. He is the law. She kneeled not because he was better. She kneeled because he was sovereign, because he looked at her with eyes that said, I see you. I do not need you, but if you dare, you may enter. That is not cruelty. That is clarity. That is the music of a man who has met himself in the dark and returned untouched. You, on the other hand, were still pleading with the mirror to show you a worthy reflection. You mistook stoicism for detachment. You called him cold, but she called him God, because he made her feel the one thing you never could, small, and not in weakness, but in awe. She didn't want to be seen, she wanted to be undone, and only the man who does not seek her can break her, not through violence, through indifference sculpted into poise, through absence turned to gravity. You, with your hands full of roses, thought softness would win her, but softness untempered by strength is simply submission in disguise. She saw your gifts as chains, your poems as apologies, your attention as currency, and love that must be paid for is already bankrupt. The throne is not built of words. It is carved from denial, the denial of every instinct that seeks immediate relief. The denial of the boy within you who believes love will fix the ache he refuses to face alone. The man who commands devotion has already buried that boy. He does not cry when she leaves. He does not tremble when she resists. He stands. And that standing, that silent refusal to collapse, is what bends her knees. You begged her to stay. He did not even ask her to come. And still, she chose him, because he knew the one who walks away is not always the one who loses. Sometimes, walking away is the final conquest. She had to chase someone, and you were already there, waiting, weeping, worshipping. No chase, no mystery, no mountain to climb. And she was born for war, not comfort. You don't understand it yet, the paradox of power, that the more you reach, the more you fall. The more you reveal, the less she sees. The more you love, the faster she forgets. Women do not remember the man who gave her everything. They remember the man who gave her nothing and made her fight to earn the right to see him bleed. It is not a game, it is a law. One you broke when you made your love her responsibility, when you asked her to hold the weight of your devotion instead of carrying the burden of your silence. She did not want your emotions. She wanted your strength. But strength is not in loudness. It is in restraint, in the exquisite torment of the man who could speak and chooses not to, who could touch and waits, who could give but withholds until she proves she is worthy. He knew what you didn't. That women test. They test to find the walls, the edges, the immovable center. You dissolved. He remained. And so she gave him what you wanted her surrender. Not because he demanded it, because he made her want to kneel. You thought being available would prove you cared. But availability is not desire. It is burden. It is the slow death of tension. You made yourself predictable. You made yourself small. And in your desperation to be enough, you became invisible. The beast never announces his presence. He simply is. And everything around him adjusts. You performed love like theater. He lived it like prophecy. You needed her to complete you. He knew she was a chapter, not the book. You gave her your identity. He gave her a mirror. And the mirror, though cold, told her the truth, that she was not ready for him, that she would have to burn her illusions before she could enter his world. And that challenge, that silent cruelty, was irresistible. You made her feel adored. He made her feel ashamed of every shallow thing she thought she wanted. That shame, that mirror, held in silence, that is power. She will never admit it, but she would crawl to him in the night if he only said her name. And he won't. And that is why she is haunted. You, with your trembling voice and open hands, thought love was kindness. But love, real love, the kind that undoes kingdoms, is not gentle. It is raw, primal, unspeakable. It is the scream behind the silence. And only the man who knows how to hold that scream without release becomes the altar she worships. He knew that love is not offered. It is taken. It is seized in the stillness between fear and longing. You offered. He dared. You obeyed your emotions. He commanded his... You allowed. He was thunder without sound. And the body remembers thunder. The soul does not forget the storm that never arrived, because anticipation is more erotic than fulfillment. You wanted her to feel safe. He made her feel alive, and aliveness, though cruel, always wins. You gave her peace. He gave her war, and she chose the war. Because women do not bloom in peace. They bloom in longing, in tension, in the terror of not knowing. And you robbed her of that terror when you declared yourself hers without demand. Now you sit, broken, not because she betrayed you, but because you betrayed yourself. Because you were never the beast. You were its echo, a howl with no teeth, a prayer with no altar. And in her silence, you heard the truth you were never worthy of her kneeling. But that does not mean you were not capable. Only that you spoke before the beast had awoken. Only that your mouth opened before your spine had straightened. She could have been yours if you had known how to disappear just enough to become inevitable. Now, be still. Do not move. Do not speak. Let her wonder. Let her ache. Let her remember the man you could have been, the one who never begged, never bowed, never broke. The one who sat upon the throne not because he claimed it, but because the world had no choice but to kneel. That is what she wanted. Not love, not kindness, not gifts, but gravity. And you, too loud, too soon, too full of fire you floated. And she was waiting for the fall. You call it betrayal, but that is a word spoken by those who mistake their own collapse for someone else's cruelty. She did not destroy you. She only walked away. It was not her leaving that broke you. It was the mirror she left behind, the one you had built from fragments of your longing, shaped by illusion, polished with need. And now, without her to reflect you, you face a truth you never prepared for. You do not know who you are when no one is looking. You believed love would save you from that question. You thought she would hold you so tightly that the pieces would finally make sense. But love cannot build a man. It can only echo him. And the echo you offered her was loud, trembling, desperate, the sound of someone trying to be heard without first learning how to listen to his own silence. You made her your mirror. That was your mistake. You mistook her gaze for identity. You leaned into her approval as if it could sculpt your soul. And so, when she turned away, it was not rejection, you felt it was erasure. You do not grieve her. You grieve the version of yourself that lived only in her eyes. But that version was never yours. It was a costume stitched from confession and sacrifice, a mask painted with passion, worn too early, offered too freely. You thought vulnerability would make you real. But Nietzsche never bowed to vulnerability. He demanded the will to power. And what you showed her was not will. It was the trembling fear of a man afraid to be forgotten. She did not shatter you. You shattered yourself in front of her, hoping the sound would impress. You mistook destruction for depth. And now, in the silence that remains, you face the truth. All the noise you made was a distraction from your own emptiness, from your own absence, from the slow, quiet terror of realizing you have never stood alone. Because a man who cannot be alone cannot be loved. He can be pitied, he can be used, but he cannot be loved. Love does not bloom in need. It blooms in sovereignty. And you, begging to be seen, erased the very thing she could have knelt before the mystery. You were so full of feeling, so ready to give, to share, to open, and yet all she wanted was to not know you not yet, to be seduced by the not knowing, to be drawn into the silent tension of a man who is complete without her. You offered completion, she wanted contrast. You gave her the whole map, she wanted to get lost. She walked toward the man who withheld, not because she enjoys pain, but because pain makes presence sacred. The man who withholds teaches her value. You, who gave too soon, taught her ease, and ease is forgotten. But the wound, the unanswered question remains. You were too available to become memory, and now, left with yourself, you scramble to find blame. You name her cold, you call her manipulative, but you know, deep down, there is no one to accuse, only the soft whimper of your own unformed self, crying for a mother, not a lover. You did not want a woman, you wanted warmth and praise and permission to remain unshaped. But she did not give it, because she was not there to complete you. She was the test, and you failed it not by losing her, but by showing her you had not yet found yourself. You think you were noble in your love, but love given from emptiness is not noble. It is a transaction in disguise. You gave her your longing and called it affection. You gave her your wounds and called it honesty. But every gift carried the secret hope, complete me, choose me, make me real. And she felt the weight of that hope and dropped it, not out of cruelty, but out of instinct, because a woman knows, beneath all her illusions, that a man must be formed before he is followed. And you were still forming, still reaching, still clinging to the soft, wet clay of your own becoming, hoping she would shape you into something worth staying for. But that is not her task. That is yours. She is not the sculptor, she is the witness, and she cannot witness a man who demands to be seen before he has been forged in solitude. You miss the warmth of her attention, but attention is not love. Love is earned in the furnace of distance when you no longer seek it, when your silence speaks louder than your promises, when your presence draws her not through need, but through gravity. You lost gravity when you spoke too much, gave too much, loved too soon. Gravity is born in tension. You dissolved all tension in the name of intimacy, and in doing so, you became the mirror that shatters too gently, breaking not with sound, but with softness. And she did not even notice the break, only the absence of reflection. You were not betrayed. You were abandoned by the illusion you created, and now you stand in its ruins, wondering how it all vanished so quickly. But it didn't vanish. It was never real. You performed a man instead of becoming one. You hoped that performance would be enough, that sincerity would suffice. But sincerity without power is pity, and no woman kneels before pity. You called it a connection, but it was a confession. You poured out your soul in the first act, forgetting that the most sacred things are always hidden. You led with your heart when you should have led with your shadow, because love does not seek the light, It seeks the one who can hold the darkness without flinching. She wanted the beast, not the boy, the altar, not the apology, the flame, not the smoke. And you gave her the smoke, the signals of your desire, the poetry of your ache. But she had no fire of her own to light with it, and so it faded, like all things that are given before they are earned. Now you walk alone, and that is the beginning, not the end, not the tragedy, the beginning, because only now, stripped of her gaze, do you have the chance to see yourself without performance. Only now do you feel the cold truth Nietzsche whispered: he who cannot endure his own solitude is not yet free. So endure it. Let the silence pierce. Let the hunger burn. Let the absence become the forge. Do not seek new mirrors. Do not beg new reflections. Sit in the dark. Breathe. And when you rise, not to chase, not to explain, but simply to exist, she will feel it. Maybe not her, maybe another, but someone will. And they will not kneel because you asked. They will kneel because you no longer need them. Let the mirror stay broken. Let the silence speak. Let the throne build itself beneath your feet. There is no echo now. Only the faint breath of a man who once thought love meant being seen. The mirror lies shattered not in rage, not in ruin, but in quiet resignation. The pieces no longer reflect. They cut. And that is how it begins. Not with adoration, not with applause, but with the sting of becoming. She does not return, she never does, but her absence is the final gift. The silence she left behind sharpens you. In the distance, something stirs. Not hope, not longing, just the weight of your own steps. You do not chase. You do not explain. You do not forgive. You vanish not in weakness, but in form. And that, finally, is when they begin to follow.